Hey everybody, it's Nate and Steph from EXPLORIST.life. We teach people how to build DIY campers. Welcome back to episode number 27 of our Ford Transit DIY camper van build series.
In last week's episode, we put in insulation into the van, and in this week's episode, we are going to be installing walls. So let's get started.
It is 10:21 on Monday morning, and we just got back from the lumber yard. Got entirely too many dollars worth of lumber. It's way too expensive. But anyway, this week we're doing walls and ceiling. We have 5 days to get all this installed, and if we don't get it done in 5 days, we have to move on to the next project. So we're going to be taking these 5 days to get all the furring strips, all the L-track up, all the panels mounted, dry fit, finished, and then remounted. So, you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
We started this project by measuring and cutting all of our 1x4 furring strips. The L-track and wall panels will both mount to the furring strips. With Open Roads Fest coming up, we were on a tight schedule here.
Day 2 of the wall panel installation. So day 1, we got a little bit of the furring strips put up, but we did run into a few issues. The main issue that we ran into yesterday was trying to drill through hardened steel on the van. So spots like right here, broke a few drill bits, ended up having to go get some cobalt drill bits and learned that drilling slower through that worked a lot better. But if y'all have any tips for drilling through hardened steel, please leave them in the comments.
And this morning we will finish up temporarily mounting the furring strips to get them to their proper lengths and get them ready to mark their mounting holes. We just finished up the furring strips and getting them all temporarily secured to the wall. A few tips that we found on the hardened steel is to use a really small cobalt drill bit. We ended up using a 1/16 inch drill bit to make the initial hole into the steel. And then we ended up making it bigger with a fairly small step bit. I'll put links to both of these in the video description. So the next step is going to be temporarily mounting and cutting, or permanently cutting and temporarily mounting the L-track. We're going to tack it at each end, and then we're going to drill holes at each of these spots in the L-track through the 1x4 and through the metal of the van. Once we get all of those holes drilled on this entire wall, we're going to put plus nuts into each of the holes in the metal of the van, and these are going to secure this to the metal of the van nice and secure. In the spots that we can't put plus nuts, we're going to use T-nuts on the back sides of the 1x4s so that we're still grabbing a hold of this wood for added security. So we're still running behind schedule, but that's the plan, and we're going to get working. We're on day 3. Day 3 today, so we are still just ever so slightly behind schedule. We couldn't catch up from yesterday. We actually had to pull Chad in on the project yesterday, and he's going to be helping out today. So this is the grand introduction to Chad to the channel. He's our warehouse manager, so he is doing all of the fulfillment. So if you've ordered anything from shop.explorist.life, he's likely been doing that. So everybody in the comments say, hi Chad. So he is going around and doing all of the hole drilling right now for the remaining pieces of L-track and everything like that. And also I whacked the fuck out of my eye earlier today. So I was drilling one of the holes, and I was in it. I was involved with this the drilling of this hole, and the drill caught and just whacked me in the face. And there's nothing I could do about it. I felt like I'd gotten punched. But anyway, that's how my day is starting. So that being said, I think I'm gonna go operate a miter saw. And despite my rapidly swelling face, we managed to drill all of the holes through the furring strips and through the van's support ribs. Once they were all drilled, we removed the furring strips to prep for plus nuts.
We're going to be securing the L-track and the walls to the walls of the van using plus nuts. And so we wanted to try out a couple of different tools to make this job easier. I think we've got around 400 spots in the van that we need to put plus nuts, so we wanted to try to make this a little bit easier. So the first tool that we're going to try out is this Astro 1450 manual tool. And then the second one is a pneumatic air gun tool. And I'll demonstrate how each of these work. I'm just going to put the plus nut on and screw it into place just until it touches. Then we're going to put that in the hole, and then we're just going to squeeze this closed. And then we're just going to repeat that process until it is all the way tight. Cool. And then you're just going to go until it's just tight. You don't want to muscle it too much. So now we're going to take this tool out, just back that bolt out. So now we're going to do the exact same thing with the pneumatic tool. And so this is connected to an air compressor. It's currently set at about 90 PSI, which is what's recommended in the instruction manual. So we're going to put the plus nut on the end of the gun. Tighten that up, put that into the hole. And then we're just going to press the button to go forward. And you can kind of hear when that gun stops. Since it's set to the correct PSI, it's not going to over tighten itself. Then we're going to reverse it. And that one's done. So now you can see how all of these are set in there. Then our bolts are going to go through the L-track, through the furring strips, and screw right into these plus nuts. We're going to be using plus nuts in the walls wherever we can, but there are some spots like right here that just spans a pretty good distance that there's nothing back here to put a plus nut into. So in those spots, we're going to be using T-nuts. So that'll go just on the back of the furring strip, and the bolts will go through that instead of through a plus nut. Where we are doing plus nuts though, we do need to make the holes that we've already drilled a little bit bigger. So I'm going to be drilling those holes out, putting a little shot of paint in them for rust prevention, and then setting the plus nuts.
Now, as you saw from our demo, the pneumatic plus nut tool was 1000% faster, so we just used that tool to install all of our plus nuts. So Steph is in there working on the plus nuts, and Chad is drilling some more of the holes. I am in here finishing up the furring strips for all of our mounting hardware. So what that means on my end is we're taking our plus nuts, and I am countersinking on the back of the board where there's that little flange so that it sits nice and flush across there once it's mounted on the wall. And on the other ones, with the spots we can't get a plus nut through the metal, I'm putting a T-nut, and that T-nut simply gets smashed in there with a hammer. The other thing I'm doing here is any spot that this piece of wood butts up to another piece of wood, like a vertical here, I'm going to put pocket holes in this end of the wood just by using this Craig pocket hole jig. And that is going to get all of this tied together in the van wall, and it's going to be probably the most secure thing that I've potentially ever built. So I'm gonna get to work on all of this and try to catch up with them in the van.
We have all of the T-nuts and plus nuts put into their proper spots, and now the next step is going to be to put the furring strips back on the wall with the L-track attached, and we're going to use these black bolts to secure that to the wall there.
So morning of Thursday, day 4, we have all of our L-track installed, L-track and furring strip. We wrapped that up yesterday, and wow, what a long day yesterday was. So about quitting time yesterday, I was kind of tired and frustrated at a problem that we were having, and ultimately just taking too long. And the team told me to quit being lazy, and we freaking rallied, and we got some fajitas and some beer, and we worked until like 9:30 last night. So we're all pretty tired this morning. But Chad and Stephanie are working on the panels that are actually going to be mounted up to the furring strips in the L-track as we speak, and they're waiting on me to start cutting. So I'm gonna get to work.
Day 865 of walls. No, day 5 of walls. So yesterday we got all of the wall panels cut and fit, so they are in their proper places. The only thing that we didn't get done on the wall panels yesterday, cutting out the spaces for the windows. So that's what Nate is working on right now. He's also working on getting the window jambs ready to go. Then what I'm doing is going through and putting all of the screw holes into the wall panels where they're going to live. So we're actually not going to upholster these walls. What we're going to do is just sand these really nice and leave them natural. And then we're going to put a furniture polish finish on them. So this one is completely done. It's been sanded, it's been polished. It has all of the screw holes. It is completely ready to go on the wall. So I'm going to keep working through all of this.
The next thing to work on is the 2 wall panels that are surrounding the windows. And before we actually cut those holes out or get those mounted up, we need to install our window jambs that span the distance from the window to the wall. These are actually made by Satsang VanWorks, which is the sponsor of this week's video. So special thanks to Satsang VanWorks for making an awesome product that kind of solves a problem, as well as for sponsoring this video. We heard of these whenever we did our Arctic Tern windows, because they make these window jambs specifically for the Arctic Tern windows. So this gets mounted to the spacer that we've already installed whenever we did the windows. The wall panel gets over the top of that, and then the window blind for the Arctic Tern windows mounts to the front of this window jamb with our bug screen and our blackout curtains on that. But this needs to be mounted with furring strips on the top and the bottom. The other issue that we're going to run into, the transit body is not parallel to the interior panels. So this is actually going to be tapered a bit. So once we secure this to the window and this to the furring strips, it's going to sit like this, a little bit off kilter, like so. So once we get this in there, we're going to have to mark this line, and then we're going to have to cut that out. the jamb will taper, but the front will sit flush with the front of the wall so that our window blinds look nice and neat. That's kind of confusing and a hard concept for me to grasp. So we're just going to do it, figure it out, and show you the end product. We repeated that same process to the other window as well. Now it's time to work on our middle panels, which will sit flush against those window jambs. We traced out the window from the exterior of the van and then cut out the hole with a jigsaw. Very good. Wow. And it was a perfect fit. So day 6, we said we were going to get finished in 5 days, and that was lofty, we knew that, but it just didn't happen. So we worked a little bit over the weekend. We got the entire driver's side wall completely wrapped up. Today, we are going to do the ceiling, as much of it as we can. We have to make our cutouts for our Nomadic air conditioner and our Maxxair fan and our puck lights, and that is the plan for today. So let's get started. The process here is the same as the walls. We mounted our furring strips and L-track with plus nuts where we could, and T-nuts everywhere else. The ceiling L-track has fewer connection points to the van support ribs than the walls, but we won't be hanging hammocks, seats, or anything like that from the ceiling. The ceiling L-track will be used in conjunction with the wall L-track to hang cabinets from, which this will work perfectly for and will be plenty strong. This is the last day of walls and ceilings for part 1 of this video. There's going to be a part 2, which we'll talk about here in a bit, but I wanted to show you what we accomplished yesterday. So we finished up all the furring strips and the L-track across the ceiling. So we've got a long piece of L-track front to back, and then a shorter piece side to side right down the middle, and airplane noises. Okay, so the panels are going to fit on the ceiling just the same way as they were on the walls. And that's what we're going to work on today, is the panels to fit here and here. Up here, Grace had the idea to actually capture this front furring strip in between this little lip right here and the roof on each side. And that was able to span the distance so that this angle isn't quite as severe. And we're able to put our panels up there and then also up here that'll go down into the headliner and trim this out really, really nicely. And this is all pretty secure for what we are going to be asking for it to do. So we have both of the panels cut for the middle section of the ceiling with our Nomadic air conditioner hole cut and our Maxxair fan hole cut. We just took measurements and cut those out. And now we need to cut holes for all of the puck lights that we have. Now we have 5 pairs of puck lights. We've got 100 inches of space to work with, which means that each pair is going to be 25 inches apart. So we're taking our measurements and then cutting our hole with a 2 1/4 inch hole saw for ours. And if you are cutting thin wood like this, run a hole saw in reverse, and it may take a little bit longer, but it's going to make a cleaner hole. So I'm going to get started on this, and we'll check back in once they're installed. Once our 10 holes were cut, Steph sanded and finished the ceiling panels. We brought the panels into the van, pulled out the wires, wired and set our puck lights, and screwed our panel in place. Before we installed the next panel, we had to swap out our Nomadic air conditioner bolts for some shorter ones so that they didn't come down so far and interfere with the ceiling panel. Next, it was time to finish wiring our Nomadic air conditioner. We screwed the control panel to the cover, attached it to the faceplate, and attached that whole assembly to the air conditioner body. Next, we tackled the Maxxair fan interior trim ring. We measured how much was needed to be removed, and then cut it off with a jigsaw. Then sanded the edges and placed it in the ceiling with the screws that came with the Maxxair fan. Now this is the part in the build where we drilled and cut out the holes for our USB, 12 volt, and 120 volt outlets. For the USB and 12 volt outlets, we simply used a hole saw to cut the hole, connecting the wiring exactly as we showed back in episode 13 and 14 of this series, and attach the cover and outlet to the wall. For the 120 volt outlets, we had to add an additional 1.5 inch furring strip behind the panel, which we added with pocket screws. The outlet simply attaches to the furring strip with the teeth on the side of the box. And then the outlet gets wired just like we showed back in episode 18 of this series. Then we measured and cut the outlet opening in the panel, reinstalled the panel, and put on the faceplate. So 3 weeks have passed and we are finished with Open Roads Fest and are wrapping up all of our halfway finished projects. Now before Open Roads Fest, we finished up the driver's side and half of the ceiling, and we went to Open Roads Fest, finished up a few little things, and now we've finished up the ceiling, and Steph is now currently putting the final touches on the passenger side. So here's a recap of what we've been working on for the last week. With this side, it went a lot faster the second time around since we already kind of knew what we were doing. We measured and cut the furring strips, and Steph temporarily mounted them in place using our cobalt bits to make pilot holes as necessary. Then we cut down the L-track to their proper lengths and temporarily mounted the L-track to drill the holes through the L-track to mark our plus nut locations. And then we took down the L-track and Chad enlarged the holes for the plus nuts. And then we sprayed all the holes with Rust-Oleum to prevent rust and installed all the plus nuts. And then we countersunk the back of the furring strips for the plus nut lips and remounted the furring strips and L-tracks for good. And then we tacked the Satsang window jamb into place and mounted furring strips around it. And then we traced the wall taper onto the window jamb, cut the window jamb to fit the taper, and reinstalled the window jamb. And then we mounted our furring strips for our 120 volt outlets. Next we dry fit our ceiling panels and cut our wall panels to fit. And then we traced our window cutout from the outside of the van and cut the window hole to match. And then we sanded, finished, and remounted our wall panels and hung the Arctic Tern blinds over the window. And lastly, we installed our USB outlets, 120 volt outlets, and Anderson ports for cabinet lighting and power. And we are super happy with how this turned out. The black on birch look was everything we were hoping for, and the L-track is going to give us near infinite places to mount cabinets, beds, shelves, and pretty much anything else to the walls. The switched and constant power connectors for cabinet power and lighting are also great, and you'll see much more of these as we get into our cabinetry in upcoming episodes. The switches, fuse panel, and Victron Touch 70 GX ended up looking incredibly clean, mounted right above the sliding door for easy access. And lastly, our Arctic Tern windows, framed by our Satsang VanWorks window jambs, brings tons of natural light into the space, but still gives us the option for having bug screens or blacking the space out for privacy or sleeping. Now we still need to tackle the doors, trim, and other problem areas, but those will come later as we need to step away from the walls for a minute for all of our sanity and move on to some other projects like power and plumbing. And these are coming up next, so stay tuned. And that finally wraps up this project.
If you're not sure how we got to this point in the build, be sure to tap below for our full Ford Transit playlist.
And if you are all caught up, tap here to watch the next video in the series, which is going to be showing you how we installed the power system in the van. We'll see you next week.